It's Rise of the Floodborn week, and it's time to run through and give my thoughts on every single card. Let's do it. Now that I've had some time to open packs and play a decent amount of games, both in person and digital, here are some of my thoughts on Rise of the Floodborn. We have 204 cards to get through, so I'll be going through each at lightning speed. I'll spend more time on some of the cards that I think are stronger or more impactful and let you know what I think of them. Let's get started. I covered Bashful in my video breaking down the dwarfs, so go check that out for more info. He's got quite the stats on him, very efficient, but he's definitely relegated to a dwarf-focused list. Christopher's pretty fun. In the right Ruby deck, you can get like 6 lore per turn with him, and on top of that, he's inkable. He's got potential to be the centerpiece of a deck for sure. I'm just not certain he's consistent enough for it to be a top contender. Cinderella comes in hot as one of the most hyped new Amber cards. She's a new 1-cost 1/2 with a bonus ability, and let me tell you, Singer 3 is kinda nuts. She can sing some fantastic songs starting on turn 2. Beyond that, she's a princess and a shift target. One of the best rare cards already, and we just got started. Oh look everyone, it's Amber King Triton. Without a doubt my favorite dwarf card, doing his best lantern impression as he quests. I could see this as a new Amber staple in a lot of different decks. The dwarfs really hate it when Dopey is banished and they get mad and boost up their strength. Perhaps a battle dwarf deck is viable. I wouldn't bet on it, but who knows. What a wacky vanilla card. A 5-cost 1/9 is beefy, clearly meant to receive those tasty Amber heals. This could end up being a good common, but at 5 she's pretty contested in Amber with both old and new cards. We have a singing Gaston doing his best impression of Ariel without the scouting power. I knew we'd see something like this. I talked about it in my Amber Sapphire villains video. Also, the artwork here is perfect. He joins the fray purely to tempt me into a Royals deck full of kings, queens, princes, and princesses. However, I don't know if +1 strength is nearly impactful enough to consider him. I hope I'm wrong though. This is what I get when there's no Floodborn Cusco and no Mushu in set 2. He's an okay dwarf card. This is what I get when there's a Floodborn Yzma and Cheshire Cat in set 2. We'll get to those soon. Now this one is interesting. When paired with Grand Pabby, they create an odd little lore engine, but he also slots well into a Ruby deck, although Surfer Stitch is still by far the king of high-cost Amber characters. Oh look, it's Moana Mouse, except he's also a triple lantern when he quests? Well, that seems pretty good. Imagine paying 3 less for a big Goofy next turn, my goodness. This is one of my favorite cards from the set so far. Of course, it would be our first legendary card. When he's banished, you have a chance to play a character for free off the top of your deck. Lots of fun potential in a character-heavy deck. Here we have a 3-cost character, 2/3 stats with support. I think this Mulan is actually a really good card that's being overlooked. Not bad at all in a mid-range list. And she can also shift into this Mulan. She's kinda like the Mufasa we just covered, except she plays songs for free off the top when she quests. This ability will only get better over time as new songs are added to Lorcana. Her shift 2 is a bit odd though, since the cheapest Mulan is already a 3-cost. Nana gives us some great Floodborn synergy, again throwing some Amber heals around. In fact, Nana lets someone completely full heal when you play a Floodborn character. That's crazy, but only viable in a heal deck. Here's a cute little guy. We actually don't have any other vanilla 3-cost 2/4s actually. We have some with abilities like Tinkerbell and Jasper, but Piglet here lets us quest for 2 lore. Nothing super crazy, sorry Piglet. Here's a 2-cost 1/4 Rapunzel that can heal 2 damage. I like the synergy here for a few cards we'll cover down the road, but Rapunzel can also shift into Rapunzel Gifted Artist. In fact, you can shift right in on your next turn if you wanted. This Rapunzel gives us even more heal combos, this time with some always appreciated card draw whenever you heal. This encourages multiple small heals, which brings to mind a few fun combos. Here's another dwarf for the dwarf deck, although I think he's probably one of the weaker ones. Sneezy also joins us. He's doing his best Maximus impression, except he can reduce a character's strength each time a dwarf is played. That could be quite annoying. Speaking of dwarfs, Snow White is here to reduce their cost, a must-have if you want to make a dwarf-focused deck. There's another Snow White though, another 2-cost. This time she's here to help your healing decks out. And don't forget, each of these Snow Whites are princesses, so they could synergize that way too. But we're not done yet. We have a Floodborn Snow White, and a legendary at that. She shifts in at 4, and when she quests, she pulls a Hades and returns a character to your hand from your discard. She sounds incredible, but I think I still like Hades more. On-play effects just feel so much more impactful to me, but if you can get her to stick around a few turns, she has so much value. The Queen comes in to ruin the day with her villainy. This is another one-cost character that I'm so glad we got. I predicted her as an early character option for a villains deck. But she also shifts into another Queen with a great ability to +4/-4 a couple characters for an efficient challenge. And more importantly, you can shift too. That means shift in on turn 2 with the Queen. And that means singing any 5-cost song on turn 2. And I'll take the time to repeat that. You can sing any 5-cost song on turn 2. Incredible. Now getting into the actions and items, hold still removes 4 damage from a character. Pretty boring, I think. Last Stand lets you banish any character who was challenged this turn. It's removal, but you do have to challenge in. This is good for Amber as they had no direct removal like this before, but it does require a 2-for-1 a lot of the time, which doesn't feel very good. Here's a fun song. It reduces 2 character strength and lets you draw a card. This one might introduce some unexpected trades in the early game, but overall it doesn't seem all that great in Constructed. And here we have even more Amber removal, this time in song form. This is essentially a Dragonfire that works only on characters with 5 or more strength, but with the trade-off being it's a 3-cost inkable card and able to be sung. This will see some play, especially with the Queen or support characters who can ironically boost an enemy's strength to banish them. Here we have a song that gives us some great explosive ink power, and I mean explosive, as in a turn 4 Surfer Stitch or a turn 3 Cinderella kind of explosive. Insanely good card. This will be a staple for many Amber decks from here on out, and it's one of the reasons why Cinderella is so good and Lantern is a bit out of style. Here we have an item with more character discard retrieval, but this time for support characters specifically. It seems odd that it costs 3 ink every time you get to do it though. I mean really, I don't get this one. Sleepy's Flute is next. This card is really fun. 1 lore each turn for every flute on the board. I think there's some great potential here that's yet to be tapped into fully. Getting into Amethyst now with Arthur. When he quests, you can return or bounce a character back into your hand to gain 2 lore. Not just 1, but 2 lore. And remember, you can bounce some fun stuff if you wanted to. Beyond the expected goat or rabbit is Hades, Tink, and more. The Blue Fairy is here. She's evasive and she lets you draw a card whenever you play a Floodborn character. I like that there's even more card draw in Amethyst, and yet the way it works still feels new and fresh. Chip joins the party, but sadly, I do have to say you probably won't find me playing him over Archimedes. Dr. Facilier gets another Amethyst card, this time a 4-cost 4/2 with evasive. This is actually kind of nice in Amethyst since you don't have many other ways to deal with evasive characters. Just like Facilier, Elsa gains another card as well in Amethyst. This time we have a 3/4 that challenges as a 6/4. This could be quite nice, especially with Pocket Watch or Madam Mim. This is more of a fun idea though, rather than a new top combo. We have a few Fairy Godmothers up next. The first is a 5-cost 3/7. I guess that's kind of like a Maleficent that quests for less but has extra willpower. Nothing crazy. But we also get a 3/3/4 Godmother. She lets you exert a character whenever you play out a Cinderella card. Sorry, Wardrobe. Fairy Godmother can also shift for 2 into her Floodborn version. This is quite the legendary card. When she quests, all your characters gain +3 Challenger and the ability to return to your hand when they're banished. This unlocks potential for a lot of different cards. I'm definitely planning to explore this in a deck more. Hey Hey is here again, and he dreams of being a phoenix apparently, as he returns to your hand when banished in a challenge. Next up is another low-cost evasive. Jiminy lets you draw a card when you play Pinocchio. We'll have to see if this combo becomes prevalent in certain aggro decks, but so far it's not too impressive. And finally we have a Llama Cusco. He's another 2/1/2 like Jiminy that helps you draw a card, but his activates when he's banished. I really feel like he could have had an extra lore pip, sort of like a reverse version of Flynn Rider, but oh well. Now we're getting into all the Merlins and Madam Mims. Starting with Merlin's Shapeshifter. He adds a lore to his quest every time you return a character to your hand from in play. Although he has a whole lot of tools to make it work, as we'll see soon, I found him to be a bit sluggish compared to the other cards like Goat and Arthur that tend to gather lore a lot quicker and compete for that 4-cost position. That being said, he's still a natural choice for many wanting to dive into all the Merlin and Mim synergy, so let's get into those cards that support him. Merlin Squirrel lets you scout the top card of your deck whenever he's played or leaves play. Meanwhile, the Crab Merlin grants you challenge strength with Challenger +3 whenever he bounces in or out. Rabbit Merlin draws cards when he bounces in or out, my favorite so far. However, Goat Merlin is the star of the show, granting you 1 lore when played or bounced back to hand. He's truly the goat of the Merlin cards, I think, as he can be played in a number of decks, perhaps even a must-play in every single Amethyst deck. I really think he could be that good. But Merlin's not alone. This is a sorcerer's duel, after all, between him and Madame Mim. Her snake form shows off the synergy between her and Merlin. He comes in and Mim follows, scaring him off. When you play out the snake, you must return another character to your hand. Madame Mim as a fox does the same character return upon entering play. She also has 4 strength and rush at a cost of 3. This is a wonderful card that will replace Rafiki or Zeus in many decks. You just have to have a lower cost character you're wanting to bounce. Beyond the obvious choice with Merlin, you could bounce back something you'd like to use as ink, or bounce back something you'd like to protect after they quest. We have a Floodborn Madame Mim as well. She shifts in for 3 and can exert to play a 4 cost or less character for free. They gain rush, but are banished at the end of their turn. I think the clear receiver of this boost is Goat Merlin, but there's some other cool ideas such as Hades. Madame Mim does get 1 more card though, the legendary Purple Dragon. That's right, we have another terrifying 4 lore evasive character, but in order to be played, she must bounce 2 characters of yours back to your hand. Obviously, this additional requirement is to offset her huge potential, but you can always bounce back Merlins for even more synergy goodness. After all the Merlins and Mims, we get to Peter Pan's Shadow. This is a fun card that not only has evasive and rush, but grants evasive to all of your rush characters. This could allow a next level amount of protection in Amethyst against evasive characters, but it does feel a bit expensive unless really utilized to its fullest potential. Next we have a few Pinocchios, starting with this 2-cost 1/1 that exerts an opposing character when he's played. In other words, this is a straight up replacement for Freeze, a card that saw next to 0 play from set 1. We also get a 2-cost 1/1 Pinocchio that quests for 3 lore. This is quite the aggro card that can be a menace, especially against a non-steel deck. But that's not all. We have a Floodborn Pinocchio, a 5/3/3 that shifts in for 3. He has a built-in upgraded Befuddle, but feels kind of weak otherwise. I wish he also had 3 lore or was at least inkable. Okay, this has gotta be the best card in the game, at least the concept and artwork is. Mechanically, the Honey Wizard is just an Amethyst Jumba with better strength. I don't think it'll be played all that often. In fact, we have a similar Emerald card with Verana. Looking at these 5/5s, it's kinda embarrassing that Jumba was an uncommon card that was never played when these new commons are just straight up upgrades. Next is Yzma, another wardrobe killer. She's the same exact card, but she has the villain trait. Oh, and she also shifts into this Yzma on her next turn for 4 ink. When you play her, you shuffle a different character into that player's deck, and they draw 2 cards. This is a really good card. It can be used as a hard removal tool against an opponent, or used on your own character as a card draw tool. Definitely one of my favorite new Amethyst cards, and I think it's extremely slept on. Onto the songs and items. Gruesome and Grim comes in. You'll recognize this action as the ability from the Floodborn Mim, letting you rush in a 4-cost character for free and then banishing them. I think it's a bit situational, and it feels really bad being uninkable even though it's a song. Next up we have I'm Stuck. To me this is comparable to Freeze, but it's reactive instead of proactive. I do like it better though. It feels good at 1 ink and inkable. Perhaps it joins a control deck of some sort that wants to stall out for several turns. Something with Elsa and Spellbook perhaps. Here's a new Amethyst song. It grants a character +3 challenger this turn. Doesn't feel all that great to me though. Binding Contract can be tapped along with a character to exert an opposing character. Again, compared to Freeze, which was never played, this one does stick around turn to turn, but there's a lot of loops to jump through before it actually kicks in. 4 cost, uninkable, character on board. I think it's all way too much for my liking. Here's another item version of an existing action that doesn't see much play. I think you just play Pocket Watch, I think, instead of this item, but maybe there's an item deck angle that wants a 1-cost item specifically, but yeah, I'm pretty skeptical. This one's a bit better. Banishing it lets you return a character to your hand. It works with all the Merlin synergies, but I'd rather just play a Mim character than this item. Finally, the Sorcerer's Spellbook is a very fun lore-generating item. I think this card has a chance of being meta-defining. I could see it in a Ruby control deck or a Sapphire control deck. They can remove characters and stall out the game while questing with 2 or more spellbooks for the win. Now onto Emerald, and we have another Arthur. This one reminds me of Lilo, except a tiny bit beefier. Probably not all too great of a card. However, he's followed by this new legendary Beast, which certainly is a great card. Whenever an opposing character is damaged, you may ready him. That means ready in quest with him, by the way, potentially multiple times a turn. So get those steel cards ready, because this Beast is fantastic with them. You can't have Beast without Bell, and this Bookworm quests for 1, but it turns to 3 if the opponent has no cards in their hand. This is the beginning of a new Emerald concept involving opponent hand discard. We'll be seeing a lot of that, starting with the next card, our Floodborn Bell, and the second Emerald Legendary. She shifts in for 3 and quests for 3, and whenever she's challenged, the challenging player discards all cards in their hand. This one's quite something. It feels great in theory, but I bet she'll be an absolute magnet for Smash, Dragonfire, etc. going forward. As a 2-cost Emerald with Ward, Bucky brings to mind Aladdin Prince Ali, but his ability makes Ward feel actually useful, as he can discard an opponent's card whenever you play a Floodborn unit. Cheshire Cat gets a new card. This is a 2-cost 3/2. His purpose in life is to shift into this beautiful kitty. He costs a pricey 8, but shifts for 5. At 5 strength, 6 willpower, 2 lore, and evasive, he's quite strong. Oh yeah, and he also exerts to banish a chosen damaged character. Isn't that handy? Another great Emerald character destined for a steel partnership. Daisy Duck joins as a 4-cost 2/3, and not only can she quest for 2, when she does, each opponent must discard a card. More fuel for the discard engine for sure. Ironically, Donald Duck has the opposite power, allowing both you and your opponent to draw at the start of your turn. This is our first look at a card that has an activation phase at the beginning of a turn. He's also a Floodborn character, and we have a 3-cost Donald Duck to pair him with. This Donald benefits from actions boosting his strength. With a few spells slung around, he can challenge up into a lot of strong characters, especially if you use an action that boosts his strength already. That being said, I'm not a huge fan of strength boosting. It just doesn't feel very effective in Lorcana. Next is Dr. Facilier, Brave Little Tailor. I mean, it's a 7-cost 4/4 with 3 lore and evasive. He's essentially a BLT with Jasper's ability mixed in. She's the opposite of a challenger. She's an enchantress. She gains +2 strength when being challenged. Her early pressure on turn 2 plus annoyance to remove certainly channels similar energy to Flynn Rider. Speaking of Flynn, we have a new 1-cost Flynn Rider joining the ranks of 1-cost 3s. But we also get a Floodborn Flynn Rider. He costs 4 but shifts in for 2 and is evasive. He's one of the beneficiaries of Emerald's discard theme in this set. He can quest for up to 4 lore if the opponent's hand is empty. Gaston also gets boosted up by an empty opponent's hand, but for him it's his strength that gets boosted. Certainly not as exciting or playable. I don't think Little John here will see much play, considering he's in the company of many great 6-cost Emerald characters already. I'm not entirely sure why this is taking up a rare slot in the set. Here's an uninkable 5-cost that can really disrupt the opponent with some discard. Very annoying potential here. I think Lucifer is an underrated 5-cost character in Emerald. Pain can quest for 3 if you boost his attack by 4. I could see this in an action deck, similar to Pete, but we'll get to him soon. Panic exists to make sure Pain is boosted up immediately, so on turn 3 you can quest with your turn 2 Pain for 3 lore. But this combo obviously requires you to have both of them in your hand, and I don't think they're good enough on their own to take that chance. This is a really fun character card meant for an action-focused deck. With 1 Vicious Betrayal, he can suddenly quest for 4 lore or attack with 8 strength. Very fun, but not easy to pull off. Another fun Emerald card that thrives off of discard strategies. Prince John is hard to fit into lists, though. I found myself leaving him out of my discard decks. I guess I need to test him a bit more to be sure. 1 damage on turn 2, and she quests for 2. Pretty good into aggro, but Queen of Hearts is another Emerald uninkable, so that feels pretty rough. Really cool artwork here for this evasive glass cannon. If steel didn't exist, he'd be an absolute menace. I'm so happy Ray is here. That was literally me when I saw this card for the first time. Unfortunately, this was everyone else. The Queen can discard a card from your hand and gain the lore printed on it. You will be seeing a deck built around this card on my channel at some point. I don't know if it's going to be good, but it will be made because this is such a fun card to build around. Emerald just loves 5-cost questers, doesn't it? Emerald also loves 3 willpower questers. What are the odds? Okay, well at least this one doesn't immediately fall to smash. Still quite unplayable though among all of the competition. Have you ever wanted to play any of these cards twice in one turn? Well, you better have 3 extra ink or a singer, otherwise bibbidi bobbidi boo hoo. Okay, I gotta take a break on that one. Here's a fun card called Bounce. Turns out my previous Bounce deck a few weeks back wasn't actually a Bounce deck at all. So here's an actual Bounce deck as a free bonus. Enjoy. This one's pretty good in a discard deck, but it feels a bit expensive at 3 ink, probably because it's kind of busted in a multiplayer game. Another simple action that's decent with Pete or Minnie Mouse. What a weird duo. Pack Tactics is an interesting lore generating action. This one's not quite as popular as I expected. Clearly it's meant to be paired with Steel. I love this emerging battle between damage-focused decks and healing-focused decks. It makes for a fun back and forth. Another great Emerald action for Steel decks, potentially a new staple for Emerald depending on how the meta shifts. Another great Emerald action for Steel decks for some hard removal. I probably won't ever play this unless I make a multiplayer deck, and even then it kind of feels like a trap. Moving on to Ruby now, I think Baloo is our first vanilla 3-cost 3/4. This is just Donald Duck, except it makes me feel really uncomfortable. A 5/5/5, and they really went and made the first one a 4 of hearts? Come on, guys. Okay, now this is interesting. This is very interesting. I certainly don't think it's a staple legendary like some of the others have been, but this could be a sleeper pick in an Amber Ruby deck, or maybe even a Ruby Steel deck. Speaking of Amber Ruby, this is the card I needed in Miami when I ran into 4 aggro decks in a row. More variety in 1-cost characters is always nice. Oh look everyone, it's
Ruby Peter Pan.
They really want us to play with Lore Destruction, huh? This one falls in line with Bucky and Blue Fairy as cards that react to Floodborns being played. So far he feels like the weakest of the bunch. Here's another Lore Destruction card. I'd probably play her if she was inkable because she shifts into this Imperious Queen. Beyond being insane in multiplayer, Lady Tremaine is essentially a Maleficent that grants you the mercy of choosing the victim. Lumiere arrives as our first 7/7/7 vanilla. What a lucky guy. Minnie finds herself on a moped with her stats swapped around from her Princess Glimmer. She also goes surfing in this card. This Minnie could be quite deadly in an evasive deck. Also, does this mean Figaro doesn't get his own card? I'm depressed. Minnie can also shift into this other evasive Minnie Mouse, this time gaining 2 lore whenever 2 actions are played. There's some fun ideas here with low-cost actions in Ruby, as well as Sapphire and Emerald. This card is actually pretty insane in the right deck. You can combine it with Amber or with an item deck to tease some great value out of what is otherwise a drawback. I think Ruby Amethyst Control has found its new rush champion. Cuscos everywhere are quaking. Namari feels like a better version of what Prince Philip was meant to do, trading 1 for 1 no matter what. I think she might end up eating a lot of removal herself though. Oh wait, actually this might be the new rush champion after all. Although she can't take out a bodyguard like Simba, there's a lot of other great targets in top decks right now. She also shifts for only 2 into a Floodborn Queen of Hearts. She draws you cards whenever you challenge, which feels pretty good no matter the context. I could see this as a pretty common inclusion into Ruby decks moving forward. Have you ever wanted to play Elsa and LeFou at the same time? Well, now you can. And I'd probably play him myself if he were inkable, I think. Raya can ready herself if she banishes another character and challenge again. But with only 2 strength and 3 willpower, I really can't see this being useful all that often. Instead, she can shift into Floodborn Raya on the next turn, and she can challenge a damaged character without taking damage herself. I wish this worked in the opposite direction as well, but it only happens when she's the offensive challenger. Oh, and we also have this Raya, which is just Scar, except a princess instead of a villain. Speaking of Scar, we have the legendary lion right here. He's like a machine gun version of Maui. If your opponent's board is full of wide units with low strength, he can also do a pretty good impression of Be Prepared. He works really well alongside heals from Amber and Sapphire. Shere Khan is another scary Ruby big cat. He gives you lore each time one of your characters challenges. Try him out with Rockstar Stitch, or try out this crazy combo I cooked up. Tigger is one of a kind, except that he's basically Donald Duck, so there's that. Tuk Tuk rolls into battle as well. I don't really like that he's reckless without rush, or that he's uninkable. Unless I'm missing something here, this might be the worst rare card of the set. I mean, it's either this or these, right? I'm trying to find something useful for Go the Distance. I mean, I suppose it's sort of comparable to Fan the Flames. In addition to the ready, it draws a card and it's singable, but it requires you to be damaged. Maybe it's good in the late game or a good early game with Gothel, but that seems too specific. A much better new Ruby song is Teeth and Ambitions. Use it on Donald Duck, use it before Rapunzel, use it on, well, maybe that's about it. The most diabolical scheme is apparently spending 2 ink less to 2 for 1 when you instead could just play Dragonfire. Another situational card with some weird potential, but I probably won't be playing it. Seems kind of bad. This card might be slept on though. I think it could be great against an evasive meta. That might be obvious, so I'm more interested in throwing it on a Cusco or something silly like Goofy. This one's very good in certain Ruby decks. It works well with Gothel and Maui, and in Sapphire for a control style items deck. I like that this is a passive, permanent effect as long as the item is out. I'd love to see more of that in Lorcana, but +1 strength on evasive characters is a bit counterintuitive. Sadly, I just can't imagine playing this card. It's a 1 cost uninkable for, let's just say, an average of 2 strength. Well, then it's just barely better than Stolen Scimitar, except with a cost each time you play it. Oh, and you also have to be damaged? No thanks. We're in Sapphire now, and Alice is getting a lot of hype. I don't know if I'm fully on board yet. I suppose her massive quest boost might be easier to achieve early game compared to Belle, who's another legendary alternate win condition for Sapphire. I think maybe in an Amber deck with the Queen, Alice could get some traction, but even then she's only at 5 strength and needs 10 for the boost. Speaking of Alice and her support boost, here's a very supportive Mouse with Basil. And here he is again, but this time he's Maleficent. He's also a detective though, which is neat. I wonder if we'll get something that plays off that trait in the future. Oh yeah, and here's the big Mouse. I like his card draw power, but I don't really like playing the smaller Basil to make it happen. Maybe if he was a shift 4. And wait, his title is the Great Mouse Detective? Does that actually seem like a Floodborn version to you? Whoa, look at this caterpillar. That's a high amount of lore. I like the character, I like the art, I like the stats, but I wonder if I'll ever use this ability. But I will certainly be shifting to this bad boy in on the next turn. Resist +1 to everyone, plus he can sing 5 cost songs. I'll take 4. This card is a fantastic defensive card. On the play, she can threaten Simba the way Phil does, but she also has the anti-evasive capabilities. Of course, she can also shift in on the next turn to a 5 cost Floodborn Cruella. This seems to be a common threshold of power and cost and shift cost among Sapphire cards. Cruella gets the Maximus ability whenever she quests, which is quite nice. Duke is up next. Oh, sorry, I meant Duke is up next. I like this as a new common, but I'm not too sure when the ward will come in handy. Big Brain Gaston is next. He comes without a Sapphire counterpart, but he does have his Amber, Ruby, and Emerald Glimmers. Now I just need a Steel and Amethyst Gaston for my Gaston Infinity Gauntlet. I think this will be the card that everyone tries to build around, but no one succeeds. I hope I'm wrong about that though, and the Machine Gun Heal deck works out, but for now I'm just not seeing it come together so easily. Hiram the Toymaker, on the other hand, is already one of my favorite cards in the set. An instant staple in any items deck, but he especially loves popsicles. Oh look, it's another dying parental figure. Thanks Disney, I'm not crying. Pause the video and read Jasmine's ability here. Now read Timon's ability. I'm confused why they aren't just the same exact ability. Jasmine is stingy and only wants to heal her own friends. Meanwhile, Timon is over there feeding grubs to complete strangers. Nice, we finally get some early item removal in another color apart from steel. She can also work as a mini Hiram, I suppose, discarding your own item to draw a card. Either way, they both love popsicles. More Floodborn synergy is here, and of course, the Sapphire version of the synergy involves inking extra cards. I like that she also quests for 2. Nick Wilde is here to bring back out all the popsicles after we use or destroy them. 2/4 stats with 2 lore isn't half bad either. This is a fun one, another 2 cost, 2 lore character in Sapphire, this time with great synergy with Popsicle. I promise we'll get to that one itself eventually. A 1 cost 2/2 Owl is up next. Oh, sorry, I meant a 1 cost 2/2 Owl is up next. A 4 cost 3/3 with 3 lore is up next. Oh, sorry, I meant a 4 cost 3/3 with 3 lore is up next. We have a third scoop of vanilla here, this time something original, but just barely. Sisu joins the party as our second Sapphire legendary. Whenever she quests, you get a free Develop Your Brain. It sounds pretty good on paper, but in practice, I'm not sure it feels legendary. I can see that changing as I play more though. The knock kind of reminds me of Donald with its stats and ward ability. As with Donald, I don't think I'll play it all that much. In contrast, this Pooh card seems very good. It's essentially a fishbone quill in the form of a character that activates when you quest. It's a respectable 3/2/3 in Quest for 2. I still prefer Detective Mickey, especially since there's so many ways to make use of the Enter the Play abilities this set, but I can see Pooh being a staple of a next generation Sapphire Steel ramp deck. This action is similar to Let It Go, and it's insane in multiplayer. It's player choice though, similar to what we saw with Lady Tremaine. It's nice to have more removal in Sapphire, but it probably won't see much play in single player. I think this could be a sleeper card. There's a lot of moments in the late game where slamming this card could straight up win you the game in the next turn. I can understand it being dead weight until then though, for sure. Launch is pretty interesting, adding removal specifically to an item deck, but since it still requires a 2-for-1, I wish this was at least inkable. Ah yes, Nothing to Hide. It was quite the divisive card when it was announced. I'm in the camp that says this is pretty lackluster. As with everything on this list, I'm open to having my mind changed, but knowing the opponent's hand doesn't do much for me except maybe in a best of one match. But even then, I've already had to mulligan and sometimes commit to a specific opener. I think I'd rather play Popsicle or Develop Your Brain on turn 1. Man, I got baited hard by this card. When this was announced, we knew we had a Sisu coming, but it really made me think we'd have more dragons, especially Mushu. But anyways, I don't think this is a very great card. No one likes Gumbo quite like Pabby. Yeah, I really gotta try this combo more and try to make it work. It sounds so fun. This is a really nice addition to item lists. It feels like a magic mirror for item decks. I do kind of wish it was an actual item though, instead of an entire room or location. It feels really weird thematically. It should have been Maurice's wrench or workbench or something. Okay, here it is. With all this talk about item decks in Sapphire and all this synergy with turn 1 Popsicle, here it finally is. And yes, it's very good in certain decks. I might even say it's the best common card in Rise of the Floodborn. And to wrap up Sapphire, we have Sardine Can. This is another passive ongoing effect, the way Peter Pan's dagger is. This one gives ward to all exerted characters. I haven't thought about this one all too much, but I could see it being useful in certain scenarios. Now onto our steel cards, we have a few beasts, starting with this one that deals damage when he's played out. Depending on how prevalent Resist turns out to be, I think he could be pretty decent. But not many are talking about him, probably because of all the other beasts, like the legendary emerald ones, or stuff like this. This beast that can absorb all damage normally taken by other characters. This means if you have 6 characters out, plus him on board, and your opponent plays Grab Your Sword, he'll take his 2 damage as well as absorb the other 12 damage before being banished. Obviously that's an extreme scenario, but he's pretty cool. There's also this beast, yet another legendary beast, but we're not going to talk about this one because it's very sad, okay? Beast really doesn't deserve this. Speaking of Beast, Benja joins the fray, so that Beast isn't the only steel card that can take out items when played. I like that he's still sporting a great 2 strength, 3 willpower, and 2 lore for his cost. Chief Bogo is next. He deals 1 damage across the board when a Floodborn character is played. He's actually a whole lot better than I was expecting. I think you'll be seeing him a lot. Cinderella is here, joining in as a 2-cost version of Simba, but her real strength is shifting into the incredible Stout-Hearted Cinderella. She has Resist +2, Quests for 3, and as a bonus can even attack readied characters whenever you play a song. She's the shiny new addition to Steel Song, especially when coupled with 0 to Hero, which can get her out on the board super fast, as early as turn 3 if sung by our new Amber Cinderella. Donald dives into Steel as a nice inverse of Cerberus, and has some of my favorite art in the set. 6 strength is notable for being able to take out a lot of vital 6 willpower characters. Okay, what is this card, man? I mean, as someone born and raised in Louisiana, I love the idea of the magical beignet he's snacking on, but a 4-cost 2/5 vanilla just feels bad. Compare it to the Emerald Donald or the first chapter Cinderella, who have very good abilities on top of the exact same stats. Goofy is exactly what I thought when I first looked at this card. You can't get more Goofy, but is he good? We'll just have to wait and see. Speaking of Goofy, this artwork on Hercules is pretty goofy, but I love how vibrant it is, some of my favorite from the set. Wonder Boy can also shift into Hercules Divine Hero. Even though he only has 3 willpower, it comes along with +2 resist, essentially making him a Maui on turn 4, able to shift in and attack. Another potential staple for Steel, no doubt. Next up is another character with a Floodborn version, it's Jafar. He joins Cruella as a 2-cost answer to evasives. Villains must have a thing against that. He can also shift into a Floodborn unit. We have the Dreadnought Jafar here with more fantastic artwork. I think Steel wins the artwork showdown for me in this set. Jafar here lets you draw a card when he banishes a character. Very fun stuff. Kronk is back, this time with some resist, as well as the ability to swing 2 damage over to another character when he banishes something. This is a familiar power in Steel, as we're all aware of with Tinkerbell. Here we have an efficient 4/4 character for 3 ink, but Lawrence loses his strength once he takes damage. This kind of reminds me of Jafar or something who can hit hard once and then runs out of steam. Maybe he has a place in a more mid-range Amber Steel deck that wants to heal him up after the challenge with a turn 4 Rapunzel. Oh boy, we got some literal abs of steel here. Shang throws evasive onto your other characters as a defense, a great tech card into certain matchups. And at 5, he can sing our classic Steel Song Duo. 5 costs and above are always a great bonus in Steel. We have a new broom as well in Rise of the Floodborn. This one grants units resist until your next turn. I don't think we're quite to a full broom deck archetype yet, but I'm happy to see it grow and fulfill some identity of the steel ink color. Namari is our final legendary of the set. She can challenge into ready characters. This is clearly part of a new identity for Steel, as we saw with Cindy, and as we'll soon see with Pick a Fight. She also has Bodyguard, but I think that's more of a negative here. It means when she's exerted, she can't hide behind other bodyguards. If she could, she would be way too strong. But hey, she has Musketeer Tabard synergy, I guess. With Cusco, Yzma, and Kronk in the first chapter, Pacha absolutely needed to make an appearance. I'm glad we have him, but he doesn't nearly have the same impact as the other new Groove characters. A 6-cost 4/8 is okay, but Steel's 6-cost slots are absolutely stacked with incredible cards as it is. We have another vanilla here. Naveen is a 3-cost 4/3, joining Baloo as another common. Not much else to say here other than I'd like to see a Floodborn of him next set. We have another Queen of Hearts here. This one readies whenever an opposing character is banished. That means she can be the challenger herself or just sit back and quest each time. But at a cost of 7 and only 1 lore, I think she's a bit too slow to fit into any current decks. Robin Hood is here doing his best Hans impression. They both quest to deal 1 damage. But come on, you're telling me Robin Hood couldn't take out Hans in a fight? Yeah, right. The Huntsman also has a quest ability. He lets you draw and then discard. We've seen this a bit in Steel with Simba and Cinderella, but this one triggers upon each quest, and he quests for 2 each turn. A lot of value packed in there. Move over Hercules, we have a new 3-cost bodyguard in Steel, and he's looking quite strong. The 2 lore and +1 resist feel like huge upgrades. I think the Prince is instantly a solid choice for a lot of different Steel decks. Speaking of resist, Tiana has +2 resist on top of 4 willpower, making her quite tanky, and her unique and wild ability is super fun to build a deck around. So far, nothing has really risen up as a viable strategy. I can't help but think something will rise up that puts Tiana to good use. Tiana also gets a fun 1-cost character. She's a 1-drop 1/3, joining Olaf, Minnie, and Flynn Rider as a healthy turn 1 character. On to our Steel actions and items, we start with Charge. This is a way to boost strength, but also stay alive to tell the tale. Again, I don't love strength boosting actions, so I probably won't play this much. In contrast, I love damage spells and card draw. This one is also a song, so count me in for sure. Wreck-It Ralph is here, kind of. Pick a Fight is a low-key nuts card that lets you challenge a character that's ready. This one's not getting much buzz, but it seems very strong. Again, Cusco's everywhere are quaking. Here we have another Steel song, and of course, it's focused on removal. This time, its power is determined by the number of characters in play. But even with 2 or 3 units on board, this card feels pretty nice as a 3-cost inkable song. The last cannon here can be banished for +3 challenger. Although not too interesting at first, the fact that this is a 1-cost item could make it an important piece in a Sapphire Steel item deck. And if resist does become a problem, some of these strength boosters that I dislike may very well become the best response. But for now, it likely won't see play. Speaking of resist, Mouse Armor can add +1 to a character each turn as long as it stays on board. Very annoying. And finally, our very last card to talk about today, card number 204 in Rise of the Floodborn, Weight Set. This item rewards you with card draw for playing high strength characters. Since it takes a while to get up to those numbers, I'm not super keen to add this to a deck, but it's nice to see a card draw item that's actually inkable for once. Okay, everyone, that's all I have for you today. Sorry that was so fast-paced and I didn't get to talk through every detail of each card, but I didn't want to drag on too much. This is more of a casual introduction and fun run-through of all the cards. I'll be moving on to some exciting deck lists and deck guides next. Make sure to subscribe to see more. Those are coming very soon. I hope everyone has a blast with Rise of the Floodborn and enjoys this set and Lorcana as a whole for years to come. Thanks for watching. Peace.